Hello and welcome to computer class. My name is Dave and today we're talking about layout and responsive frameworks. So navigate to W3 Schools and click on their HTML tutorial and then click on the layout tab, and that's where we'll get started. Now when it comes to writing an HTML page, so far we've really just learned the basics, and we don't know enough as of yet to create systematic layouts to where you can push pieces of the website to certain fixed positions on the page. And that's what this lesson is kind of about. It's all about responsive web design, to where you create a web page and it's able to be displayed one way on a desktop, another way on a tablet, and another way, probably more in line, on a phone. And in order to do that, you need something called the layout elements. They're containers that help us create the layout that you see here. Okay, so let's scroll down to them. They have sort of a real fake model, so to speak, of how you might lay out these. And it's not, you don't have to do it, but this is how they recommend doing it. And what they have is this tag called the header, where you would put all the things that are above the navigation, potentially, or even you could use it other places in the website if you wanted to, but mainly above the navigation. And so here's the navigation if you wanted something above that, the header. If you wanted the nav section, there it is. If you wanted to have a section, you could even have the nav in a section. You can use different sections throughout your page. And then down at the bottom, you would have the footer. Now all of these would be inside the body section because they are visible to the page. All right, so I am going to copy these, drop them into my spreadsheet, and call this the layout elements. All right, now that we have those, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Then what we do is we want to connect the layout elements to a framework so that we can target each one of those tags and manipulate them so that the elements can be positioned how we need them to be. And to do this, we use things called CSS Framework, CSS Float Property, CSS Flexbox, and CSS Grid. The CSS Framework is just basically regular, straight up, CSS. Float is a way of just floating things right or left to be, or leaving it in the center. Flexbox is more of using the creating these different boxes, so to speak, or containers, to where if the screen is this size, there's 4 across, but if it's squinched a little bit, there's 2 across and there's 2 on the bottom, and if it's squinched a little bit more, there's 4 in a row. So it creates sort of those boxes, and the boxes get pushed around, so to speak. And then grid is fixing things to a specific line system or grid system. And that's kind of what they explain here as you scroll down. Now there's other frameworks as well. There's like big time frameworks, and they consist of W3 CSS. That's another way to push things around. Bootstrap, which is another grid system, to where, and I'm teaching a Bootstrap tutorial soon. But Bootstrap is another grid system you can use. And here are the kind of illustrations of each one of these. So here's the float. You would use the float property in CSS. I hit the little try it myself. Notice they have floated different things, left, left. Okay, as they float them, and notice things are able to change positions based on those properties of CSS. Same is true with Flexbox. And if I click the Flexbox chapter here you can see the box model, how it's 8 across there, but you could use and you can push the different boxes of elements around and create the different containers that you need, and for a responsive web development, if that makes sense. And the same illustration applies here. This also gets you the same result. Now this is a simple website, so they all seemingly work the same and they all look like the same illustration, but they're all working a little bit differently. And it depends on how intricate your website is. I think if you have a pretty simple website, using something like a float would be fine. But if you're using something a little more complex, you probably would need to use the Flexbox mentality or even the CSS grid. Grid is, again, here I'll click on that. You can see the different lineups, and you would just affix things to specific grids using the box sizing model. Okay. Let's move on to responsive web design, their tab that they have here. And here's an example of a responsive website to where it looks like this on a desktop, looks like this on a tablet, and looks like this on a phone. And they ask the question, what is responsive web design? It is using HTML and CSS to automatically resize, hide, shrink, enlarge, and such a website to make it look good on all of these devices. And so in order to do this idea, you have to set a viewport, and you have to do that in the head section so that your scale of the viewport is to one device, whatever that device may be. So here's an example of without, on a phone at least, without the viewport tag. You see everything is kind of just very difficult to read. You would have to actually scroll around because it's set to desktop by default, right? So you can't really view it on a phone. But here's after you have set the initial scale to one device, it would actually scale that information so that people could view it. So this is a pretty important thing to add to your website. I'm going to copy it down and call it the viewport tag in my spreadsheet here, or element, whatever you want to call it. They're interchangeable words. All right, that being said, you could also do the same thing to images with the width property. You could set them to 100%, and that would make them fairly large because they would take up the entire width of the viewport. But notice they are a little bit resizable. And then to fix this problem of it taking up so much room, what you could do is you could set a max width property. So here's what they do as well, to where things, that way it won't go past a certain point. It'll always stay this size, but if I get to a smaller device, then it will start resizing, which is why it says the max width is set to 100% and the height is auto. So it again gives the device a little bit more choosing and the flexibility. And again, we're talking about how to make things responsive when it comes to images, when it comes to where things are positioned on the page. This is the game that you have to do. If you wanted to show different pictures based on the browser width, then you could use the picture property here. I'm sorry, the picture tag. And basically what that allows you to do is list a whole bunch of sources or pictures, and as you push over, it would switch between the different images, which is pretty cool. And again, same with responsive text size. What you could do is you could set the view width to 10, and then again, as you resize the text, notice it pushes back and forth and resizes according to the size of the window. So here we have viewport is 5. View width is 5. That's why these are a little bit smaller, and view width is 10. Okay. And then we have something that is entirely CSS based and is called media queries, which allow us to here I'll just read it to you. With media queries, you can define completely different styles from different browser sizes. Resize the browser window to see 3 div elements will automatically resize horizontally. And so if I hit inspect here and I go down to a phone size, notice that the content resizes. If I go to the size of an iPad and I flip a little bit, again, squinched a little bit more, and it has a little bit of resizing ability to it. Okay, so that's pretty cool that you can do that with media queries. And here's what it does. Basically, you set an @media screen width, and then when the browser realizes that the website is being displayed at this size on this screen, it will actually do pull those CSS properties down and create that responsive look, that look that is more laid out this direction instead of this direction for that viewer's phone or tablet or whatever. Okay, so that being said, their plugin here is to use w3.css, and that's for definitely another tutorial in and of itself. And also, they talk about Bootstrap, which are again frameworks for creating responsive design using the column method or using the w3 method with columns as well. So hopefully you thought this was helpful. Maybe it's a quick overview of something that could get your whistle wet for learning a different language, mainly CSS or Bootstrap or W3C CSS, something like that. Those frameworks could be really helpful to creating awesome websites that look and respond to the browsers that they are created on. So again, hopefully this information was helpful, and as always, I will see you in the next video.